Something magical about a playground and the way it brings kids and communities together. But for children with disabilities, that special time is often out of reach because they can't access much of the equipment.
Well, one family in Portland, Oregon was determined that their daughter would not have to sit on the sidelines anymore. In fact, they didn't want anybody in the community to have to sit out that special time. Their goal was simple. They wanted to create a more inclusive world, one playground at a time.
Harper Rose Goldberg was born June 8, 2005, and in that moment, her parents' world forever changed.
They actually brought in a priest and said, "We'd like to read her last rites."
Harper wasn't breathing. She spent her first month in the NICU before doctors determined she'd been born with Emanuel syndrome, a rare genetic abnormality.
What was the prognosis?
They suggested that we should expect she would never walk nor talk in her lifetime. I even remember in that moment feeling like, how dare they say what we should expect?
Like all new parents, each milestone was a reason to celebrate. But as their daughter grew, the Goldbergs began to notice how limiting the world around Harper could be.
We would take her to the playground and stick her in those little bucket swings. She was getting big, and I would have to take Harper out of the swing, and I would go and sit her on the curb on a blanket while the other kids would play.
The solution? Build a space where all children could play, named for the little girl who inspired it.
Break some ground!
The project quickly took off as the community rallied around the idea.
And your initial goal at that point was $200,000. You ended up with a playground that was $1.2 million.
People really instinctively understood that this was going to be a special place.
Harper's playground was designed to be different.
What is it about this slide that makes it so special?
How wide it is. It's important to have an opportunity for parents to accompany their children side by side.
This particular climbing structure, what is it that makes it more accessible?
If Harper had a friend and that her friend wanted to climb on this, if she could still be kind of connected to her and they could still be talking and hanging out together. The adaptive swing allows a child like Harper who's outgrown the baby swing to still be swinging.
Is this her favorite thing at the playground, you think?
By far.
It's just magic. You see kids of all abilities here playing together. It's beautiful, it's safe, it's fun, and it's community.
What's your favorite thing to do at this park?
Play in the sand.
Now, as her parents, what do you like about the playground?
I love that she can join in with the kids and she's included.
The government mandates public spaces like playgrounds must be accessible, but there's little oversight and no official record of just how many there are across the country. The Goldbergs hope Harper's will inspire many more.
If we had 10 more Cody and April Goldbergs, who knows what we could do.
Let's go.
It's about the concept of including everyone. It's the right thing to do, but when you do it, it's better for everyone. It's just that simple.
Harper's Playground just celebrated its first anniversary last weekend. It's really become a destination for the community, and the Goldbergs are hoping that they'll be able to continue the effort far beyond Portland. They'd like to add more of these playgrounds to Portland, but also they want to see it stretch.
It's a wonderful idea. Wonderful idea. It was so great to see all the kids playing.
They're a pretty powerful couple, too.
Yeah.
They are determined to make it happen, and I have no doubt they will.
Let's hope it catches on.
Thank you for sharing that.
Thanks, guys.
Good morning, everybody. Let's have a creative morning. I want to open with a quote. It's always a good, safe bet. Making the simple complicated is commonplace. Making the complicated simple, awesomely simple, that's creativity. That was Charles Mingus. And I thought that's a good quote because we're surrounded by a pretty creative crowd here. Feels creative. And the creative community, which is not properly represented on this is the entry marker to Harper's Playground, by the way. That's the bronze etched piece that sits in the kind of entry boulder to Harper's Playground. The creative community isn't quite properly represented on that, so I wanted to, did we just, hello. So I really wanted to call out, this room is filled not only with a bunch of creatives, I've been told, but it's also filled with a lot of creatives who were instrumental in building Harper's Playground as well. Graphic artists, landscape architects, the list goes on and on of creative people who dedicated hours and hours to make Harper's Playground real. And I just want to give you guys a shout out, not only for being creative people, but for being very generous. So give yourselves a hand, please. It's very appropriate to give me a lead into talking about my father that somebody asked. I wasn't sure if that photo was, if you were the guy with the beard or the other one. So quite literally, I was the son of Jerry Garcia's lookalike, which was an awesome reality. That photo was taken by a good friend of his who was a professional photographer who did a lot of album covers back in the 60s. And probably the most influential single person or entity or force in my life was my father, for sure. So that's why I wanted to open up with him. My childhood was really based so much around my dad. I think you can vibe it off him just looking. I was a creative dude. And he was especially creative in the name he gave me. And it was definitely, he led the drive, and one of the names was when my mom, I think, finally stepped in and said, all right, I get one. So we promised to talk about the names. Both of my parents actually were big fans of John Garfield. He was a big actor in the 50s. That's him with Lana Turner in The Postman Always Rings Twice. Cody has a backstory to it. On the day I was born, there was a love letter accidentally placed in our mailbox. And it was this flowery love letter, and it was addressed to a guy named Cody. And so being 1969 in Northern California, my parents took it as a sign from God. And so they threw Cody in there. Quentin is from San Quentin, the prison. Not really. If you go through the Google images, you will not find a picture of the Miwok Indian named Quentin. I was unable to find one, but he was an Indian chief who was a fierce warrior and gave the white man some trouble. And my dad, being this wannabe rebel kind of guy, threw in Quentin. But he is the Indian chief for whom San Quentin was named. And this is where my mom comes in. And she said, all right, he gets my name too. So that's my mother's maiden name. Those are his parents. And suffice it to say, they were not thrilled with her choice of a husband. I'm definitely the child of a little bit of a rebellion on both of their parts. There's only one single physical item that I actually hold dear. I think physical items shouldn't hold a lot of weight in our lives, but this ring was my father's ring that he wore the whole time I knew him. And I've worn it ever since the day he passed away, which has been about 13 years. And that's the most important physical item in my life, for sure. So a lot of influence from my dad. A lot of my childhood was spent hearing stories of his childhood or stories of things he had done. And there's one in particular I wanted to share. Also on the day I was born, my father was in the delivery room. At the time, in 1969, San Francisco Children's Hospital had a policy against that. No one had ever done that. And my dad thought that was silly. Of course he's going to be in the room. So there are a lot of stories from my childhood of all my father's friends and from his lifetime where people stood up to some silly norm, some paradigm that didn't make sense, and they stopped it. And of course that's definitely, I believe, a strong theme for us on Harper's Playground. There's a dominant paradigm with how playgrounds are done, and it just needs to change. It's that simple. So I mined through my childhood photos. For this talk especially, I thought, let's figure out what my childhood was all about. As you can see, it was happy, for sure. On the left is my very early experiences meeting my sister, who was named Rebecca Jessie Ruby Ann Goldberg. There's a whole bunch of other stories there. Ann happens to be my mom's name, so that's again, she was like, all right, then she gets my name. And then on the right, you'll see at a county fair. There's a little bit of a theme going on here, though, and we'll just show you two more if you see if you can pick it up. This predates the iPhone, and to my dad's credit, while he did smoke a lot of pot, the viewfinder and the lens were not one and the same, so he has a good excuse. And I don't think he probably developed the film for quite a while, so he just didn't know what was going on, because all of my photos look like that. One more with Dad. This is my second favorite photo from childhood. The other one, probably the best. But someone asked, they want to hear about Janis Joplin. And I don't have a photo of Janis Joplin in here, but this gives the vibe of where I grew up and those people. That t-shirt, I actually got to watch be airbrushed by Stanley Mouse, who is one of the most renowned rock and roll poster artists of the 60s. And you'll notice, if you're not familiar with Mickey Mouse's hand, that's Mickey Mouse's hand with a doobie. I think, yeah, I got the pointer. There's a lot of sibling rivalry that goes on, right, obviously. My sister got the Pilgrim shirt. And I got the cool one. This is my very first class photo. This was from the very first year of what was called the open classroom at our school. The open classroom was, like it says, open, very open. Not only was it open to grades in one sitting class, we had K through 6, you'll notice, all in one class together. It was open in that your assignments were open-ended. It was up to you to decide when they were due. And if you wanted to spend your whole day doing recess, rock and roll. Do it. It makes a lot of sense. So the guy with the mutton chops there, oops, oh, one sec. The guy with the mutton chops there, Mario, very influential in my life, and now the theme I really want to touch on is the importance of adults making conscious decisions towards children's lives. As I was mining through the photos, looking for the theme that I thought, you know, what happened to me as a kid? What's going on here? I realized how thankful I am for all of the adults who put conscious effort into creating a good environment for me to flourish in, and an extremely playful and caring childhood. That's the actual physical school that I went to. That would be the open classroom there. And this is the playground that was built by the community. It was a community-built playground, and we'll dive in there to check it out. Those logs, it was a great playground to grow up at. I mean, I definitely have these fond memories of it. Probably wasn't certified safe. And I cannot remember the author of this quote, but it really touches me right now. Better a broken arm than a broken spirit. And if we're going to try to make childhood too safe, we're not doing the right thing. I remember a lot of broken arms from my schoolhood days. And I think kids learned from what their capabilities were. And then, oh, one more time, sorry. This really sticks out for me as a fond memory. This was a sculpture. Those are water aqueduct pipes, and they had taken those, spread them around, and created these concrete dragon talons for them. And it was a cool sculpture. It was just really awesome. Just a few more from the yearbook. I was able to find my the two candids from my days. And I traded in the Mickey Mouse pot shirt for Elvis. I actually rebelled against my parents a little bit. I was like, you know, you always go the other way for a little while at least. And I think I might have invented the photobomb, but I don't know. I look happy, I'll tell you that much. I remember digging childhood. I don't use cursive a lot though. That is the landscape of my childhood. That school was tucked away in one of those hillsides like that. And I mean, what can you say? That's a cool place to grow up. That's those same hills from childhood in a map. And again, I just want to touch back on that theme of the powerful influence of adults to help shape a good childhood. Gary Giacomini, he was like the patron saint of San Geronimo Valley, where I grew up. He fought a 6-lane expansion that would have piped right through that valley and put homes on all those hills. And I think being here at the PDC and living in a town that has this urban growth boundary, I really want to just endorse that sucker. I benefited from living on the other side of an urban growth boundary. It's nice to grow up amongst nature. We need to provide contact with nature to children. It's a paramount importance to a healthy childhood, is some connection to nature. People, place, and movies. Those are the 3 things that most touched my childhood. And this was my favorite growing up as a kid. It was called Over the Edge. Matt Dillon's first movie. And it was a movie all about this subdivision in, I think it was Texas, but it was the Southwest, where the design of this new community neglects the kids. And the kids riot. They literally lock all their parents in the school and burn the cars, and it's this awesome, rebellious, it would be good for the next month's topic. My very first soccer team, coached by my father, my dad and a bunch of his buddies started the soccer league in the town where I grew up. So again, it just touches on how involved parents need to be to try to create that good childhood experience. Most of the kids in that photo are still my very best friends, and that is circa a long time ago. This is not a baseball team that I played on. This is a baseball team that I played against as a child. And there's a child in the back row who had pretty severe cerebral palsy. And this is a very, very influential part of my life. Definitely now more than then. I didn't know that was such a big deal. But this is Xerxes Whitney, who I grew up playing against. He was on the team. He batted every time he was supposed to bat. I think he got out every time. But he had a blast. The kids on his team probably gained more than he did from the experience. And I really look at this, especially now having Harper in my life, and I see these stories that people love to pass around on the old intraweb about the water boy on the basketball team that they let play in the final game. And there's 2 things that strike me about that. A, he should be on the team, and B, he shoots all the baskets in. Of course he should be on the team. Inclusion is a very powerful theme for my wife and I now. We really believe it should be always and everything, and why not? Let's keep it simple. I left beautiful Marin County, California, and moved to Portland in 1983 to attend Lincoln High School. And again, I look pretty stoked about it. It was definitely during my time at Lincoln that I first experienced the notion of haves and have-nots. I think my entire childhood, that really didn't enter into it. Everyone was really on level playing field. And social equity was something I'd heard about because it was important in the community I grew up in, but I started to see how important it can be while at Lincoln. And it was not only seeing it because the kids up on the hill had a lot more than the kids that came in from the buses across the southeast, but also because of social studies class. And when you see that disparity of wealth. It's mind-boggling to see that we allow that. I took up the camera while at Lincoln. I hope the camera guys are digging that camera on the left. And then that led me to a passion for camera that took me to NYU Film School, from which I graduated. That's a senior thesis project out in East Hampton. I ended up pursuing that dream all the way to Los Angeles. I worked in Hollywood for the better part of a year for free on productions, as you guys all know. You got to do it. But I wasn't vibing LA, and it just wasn't fun. So I headed to Mexico. Now, I did have a plan. I brought a camera, and there are about 22 hours of footage, maybe closer to 30 hours of footage of that trip that's in a sort of rough cut documentary. Any of you creatives want to get to work with me? I haven't given up. But this was 1 year of playing drums in a percussion band in Mexico that I thought would be time well spent. And you saw from the photos of my family life, my parents were thrilled, actually. They thought this was awesome. So we passed the hat during our street performances, and we raised enough to live off of. And occasionally we got a gig, as you'll see on the right. We actually charged a cover for that craziness. Met a lot of people along the road. The soldiers were always cool. The narc guys were not cool. But like the drug enforcement dudes, be careful from them. But the regular old army guys were awesome. On the right, those are some kids that we gave shoes to. We collected shoes along the way, and we would give them to kids in need way before that guy from Tom's. I think he took that. But I got back from my 1 year in Mexico, and it was time to get a job. I avoided it long enough. And my first job was actually in the mailroom at Adidas. It gave me a good opportunity to suss out the whole spot. And I realized that sports marketing was definitely what I wanted to do. So I was lucky enough to get hired to manage what they called action sports and Olympic sports. And the guy who was visiting I thought this was appropriate since we're working with parks, that's Mark Gonzalez visiting the Rose Garden. Those who know, give me a show of hands, who knows who Mark Gonzalez is, right? Rock and roll. What a dream come true to work with him. Talking about creativity, that guy has so much creativity rolling through his body, it's hard to be around. It's hard for him to deal with. Literally the godfather of street skating, an incredible artist in his own right. And I like to say, if Bob Dylan and Picasso had a child, that's him. I took a little sojourn away from Adidas, was hired by Red Bull to do their marketing for the state of Oregon. And that's the little party that we threw down at the waterfront. They definitely kind of got me because they were doing all this crazy stuff that was sort of felt rebellious and creative. And this is where people could make their own flying machine and launch it off the dock into the water. Good party, good time. Getting back to the movie theme, I did always recall, I never wanted, and I'm going to quote Lloyd Dobler here, I don't want to sell anything, buy anything, or process anything as a career. I don't want to sell anything bought or processed, or buy anything sold or processed, or process anything sold, bought, or processed. You know, as a career. I don't want to do that. That's always how I felt ever since I saw that movie, probably ever since I was born. And I found my way out. There are so many reasons that Harper's Playground is near and dear to my heart to the level that it's hard to deal with. It's certainly because I was born to do it. It's certainly because it's going to help my daughter have a better childhood. And the list goes on. And it's especially because I never wanted to buy anything or sell anything or all that stuff. That's my beautiful family for which I am incredibly blessed. My wife, April, on the right, this whole thing was not only her idea, but if you got that little brochure, you'll know that it all began by her putting it on a to-do list to get rolling. As mentioned in my bio, I can tend to be a bit of a dreamer, and it's always good to get in and do it, right? How many of you all out there have a dream that you, yeah, nice, do it. Even if you have to do it on the side for a while. It took me 4 years. 4 years to do it while I was working other jobs to finally jump. Lennon is our younger daughter, and that's Harper with that extra kind of tough look. So childhood, that's what we're here to talk about. We've been touching on what I think childhood is, but the most obvious single word to define childhood is play. That's where it begins and ends. Play is critical to a healthy childhood. Here's what the United Nations has to say about it. Play and recreation are essential to children's health and well-being. They promote the development of creativity, imagination, self-confidence, self-efficacy, and physical, social, cognitive, and emotional strength and skills. It's also considered a right of every child by the United Nations. These guys, they have the perfect lead-in. A quote from the American Academy of Pediatrics: "It could be argued that active play is so central to child development that it should be included in the very definition of childhood." Getting more local, pretty much the essence of what these incredible institutions is the power of play for childhood development. That's what they're about. So here's how we see the world, at least my wife and I. For most of us, this is our playground. We are free to play just about everywhere, and often we do. We play in the water, we play on the streets, and we play up in the mountains. Here are examples, and there are countless examples of children all over the world who turn a simple street corner into a place for play. There's even a jungle gym. Kids in Africa, a small ball, they don't even need a ball. Sometimes they just wrap something up, or an old tire. If you look at the faces there, they are enjoying some play. Let's take us back to Harper's playground. Just to give you the physical space, that's about it. It's definitely not precise. That's an overview of the playground that existed in our neighborhood previously. That is the very typical, what they call post and platform structure. You're very familiar with these, I'm sure of it. Surrounded by a pile of wood chips. That's Harper, just having figured out how to walk in her walker, on her way to that playground. That was the pathway we found. That was the ramp that goes down the curb into the wood chips. That is what's called a transfer deck, where a child like Harper or another child in a wheelchair is supposed to use their arm strength to pull themselves out and drag their body up the stairs to go play. Those things allow a playground to be considered ADA compliant. So, what do you think we thought about that? Harper was not having it. She thought that was silly. And we tend to agree. As you can see, this is the time for me to say, I am biased. That is the cutest kid in the world. There's a lot of cute kids out there, but Harper just takes the cake. So the problems. We're still building these things, and these things just make very little sense. Not just because they're not accessible for Harper, but because they're not inspired. They're not natural. They're actually not designed well for play. Typically, those things sit empty most of the time, but we still keep putting them out there. It's kind of like, well, I'll just liken it to back when we used to say that dads couldn't go into the delivery room. It was silly. This is silly. This makes literally no sense. The solution that people have come up with in the past is this. So there are ramped access to there. So they're literally just lifting the playground higher, and I mean, I would like a show of hands. Does that look fun? Does anyone think that looks right on? It looks like a rat maze. And that's what it is. A child in a wheelchair is just going to follow that path. Take your kid to the TSA line and call it a day. It's nonsense. And it's really expensive. And it's gonna break down. There are a ton of Buckminster Fuller quotes that work, but this one I think really fits for what we're talking about here. Even the Charles Mingus one. Making the simple complicated is commonplace. That is what that is. Buckminster knew what was up. Buckminster Fuller also said, I never set out to make something beautiful, but I know if it's not beautiful, then it's not right. So the design, how did we get there? What happened? This was what we almost did. Thank goodness this didn't happen, but this was our first design. This was the one that we were raising money for at $200,000. A lot of things went right to make Harper's Playground happen, like a billion things. And it was, as I mentioned earlier, the generosity of so many people that made this project come to be. This represents the turning point for where Harper's Playground went from a $200,000 piece of plastic into a $1 million, officially $1.2 million play plaza for everyone. Right there is Susan Goltzman. She wrote the book, essentially, on this whole process of getting rid of that structured design and building a playful plaza that's way more vibed on nature and way better for our spirits. And I gotta say, I don't have a design background, although I think we all have it. I mean, we all grow up with, we're designers. Like, you know, we build our environments. Having a seat at the table in these type of meetings was just an incredible treat. This guy right here is my old high school pal who we took drafting together. There's a lot of people from the Parks Bureau in there, and the key aha moment that Susan took us to was when she asked us all to share our favorite memory from childhood in playing. And do you know how many people in that room said the plastic play structure? Nada. Not a single one. How am I doing on time? We good? So we took what we learned from our talk and we boiled it down to the key elements that we needed. And you'll see a lot of cool stuff up there. Since Silly gave me I'm gonna keep rolling. Put pen to paper, the basics. That's my buddy Todd with Harper Helping, bringing the design to life. And there's what we ended up with. Remember that piece of plastic I showed you earlier? When this was out on paper, it was definitely tears time for the joy of what we were going to put together. As I mentioned, we upped our game from 200,000 to about $1 million. At the very same time that happened, that we went to that big number, we got notice that the city of Portland was going to require $86,000 for their staff time to bring it through. And we also found out that our budget was going to go up by another about $75,000 for the people to take the drawings through what's called the construction document phase. So I didn't put this up there, I wish I had, but think of Luke Skywalker and team in the garbage zone. Like, we felt like it was coming in on us. It was the moment of truth. So we had two ways to handle it. The first thing, this was a powerful moment in cinema. This is when the senator tells Michael that he's not only going to have to pay the permits to build the casino, but he's going to have to pay a little extra. And Michael says, So I really channeled Michael on that one. And that's how the $86,000 went away. And then we got back to our begging roots. We asked for a little more porridge. And these guys stepped up in the biggest way. This is a local firm called Place Studio, and they agreed to take that simple drawing that you saw earlier through what's called the construction document phase. And we plied them with martinis. Now you can see it was a lot of fun doing this. Well, partially because they were drinking martinis, but we had a lot of fun. But this team not only elevated the design, kept it going and taking it to a new, beautiful level, but navigated the process of getting an actual buildable approval, which is, we could spend a lot of time talking about what that takes. That's not easy. And there is how Harper's Playground essentially is built now and how it looks. And as you can see, it's literally just an open place to play, open for everyone. We got to work on the 3D design for the entryway, and paramount to our thinking was community building. We really shifted our mindset away from access to play towards building community. So circular seating areas that were beautiful and inviting, paramount. Inspired by Gaudí in Spain. We haven't put the tiles up yet. There's a little short list of things we still want to do. A model for the accessible wet sand play area. Wet sand is truly the holy grail of play materials for children. So creating a way for kids to have access to wet sand. Strip the land clean, and again, the PDC. Any people from the PDC in the room tonight? Today? Thank you. $65,792. And we cleared the site and created that spot. That's a shot from opening day. And as you can see, at least on opening day, it was full. Actually, we've been told by the Parks Bureau that it is they don't do a lot of measurements, but it's seeming to be the most popular park in the city. The success, if I can touch on that for a second, the success has been mind-boggling and overwhelming to deal with. That's what it does look like actually often. This is a perfect example of just one child's visit to the park, all the rich experiences they get to have. And speaking again about my childhood and how I look back and I'm appreciative of the landscape, literally the landscape of where I grew up. This quote is so far the one that kind of is touching me the most, for being thanked, for being involved in the process of helping change the landscape for a child. You can see more of all that. The play that goes on there, the turtle, there's a lot of elements I wanted to dig deep into, but I figured we'll focus on the turtle. We chose the sea turtle because on land, the sea turtle has a really hard time getting around. And if you've ever seen a sea turtle get up onto the beach and lay their eggs, it's intense. They work so hard to get up there. They dig for hours to lay their eggs, and then they work. They're basically spent by the time they get back into the water. But in the water, they soar like an eagle. They're free. And for us, though, that whole theme of creating the right environment so that everyone can flourish is just profoundly involved. Pete Helzer is a bronze artist out of Eugene, and he agreed to do all of the bronze work, and there's tons in the playground. And there's where they sit at the edge of the sand. There are more turtles throughout the whole space, little ones hatching out of eggs. It's awesome. If I haven't hammered home how I feel about the typical playground enough, I figured, some of you are visual learners, I'll just go for it. I think this really does speak volumes, though, about the kind of play that happens in the different type of playgrounds. Now, how did we get this all done? How did we pull this off? I call it the Fandango principle. Fandango is a 1980 movie. Again, sticking with that theme of the impact of movies for me. Kevin Costner, road trip movie. This guy here is going off to Vietnam. And before he goes, they want to throw him a wedding. And they're in a middle of nowhere town. They don't know anybody. and they just start acting like they're gonna have a wedding. And soon enough, somebody comes by and says, "What are you guys doing?" "Oh, we're gonna have a big wedding. It's gonna be awesome." And then they say, "You know what would make it better is some beer." And the guy, "Oh, I got beer." And then one after another, neighbors come by and they help them throw this wedding when they had nothing. And everyone attends the wedding and everyone has a good time. So I'm telling a friend of mine over beers, you know, I got this amazing idea. It's called the Fandango principle. I've invented it, basically. And she said, with a big smile, she said, "Oh, you mean the stone soup?" So I did not invent this. And if you Wikipedia either two of those, they're actually cross-referenced. That's how exactly Fandango borrowed the stone soup. But so the stone soup was what it was all about. From the very earliest stages, we just acted like we were going to pull this off because we knew we would. We just believed in our hearts. But then it took everyone chipping in. I mean, it's just the classic stone soup. And what's so cool about the stone soup is that like if you're just a guy with carrots and that's all you got, that's kind of boring, right? But if you throw your carrots in the stew and everyone throws it in, it's just so much better. I mean, it's just that old Marin County hippie in me saying, if we just shared more, come on, we can do this. So here are some examples. This is the first fundraiser we threw. It's a bake sale in front of our house. Neighbors baked goods. Just so happened that a guy down the street worked for the sign company and he made us that flyer, the banner. We got busy making promo materials. My background in marketing finally paying off for the good. We showed up at as many of these festivals as we could. This one happens to be down at Pioneer Square. But you know, every weekend pretty much we threw our gear in the car and we went out. In fact, this is really the result of going to a kickball tournament. We stayed all day out in the sun at this kickball tournament, harassing a bunch of drunk people playing kickball. But one of them took, all it takes is one. One of them took really pity on us, but really fell in love with the project. Her name is Felicia. That's her mom and her sister. And Felicia, who played on a kickball team against actually my team, joined our board, has worked tirelessly for this project. And the examples of that are just mind-boggling. I took every speaking opportunity I could. I spoke at a marketing class at the University of Portland. Some of the team members were in that class, and it led to a partnership with them. The Timbers Army jumped on board like the Timbers Army does, and we raised, that check is for $20,000 something, but we raised over $86,000 with the Timbers Army, and had a lot of fun doing it. We did a concert at the Crystal, and I really just wanted to show this because I love that Harper and George Clinton were on the same marquee. And we sold pavers for that entryway so that not only turned out a good way to raise some money, but so that the neighborhood was truly not only invested in it, but felt like it was theirs, because it is theirs. So where do we go from here? You all heard I quit my job 2 weeks ago, so this is fresh. We're going to cover the land with these suckers. That is the plan. And that's actually where you come in. This is the big time for an ask. No, I'm kidding. I've done that. I'm hoarse from asking for help for years, but I will say, if one person in this room is moved for this, I would love to talk if you want to get involved. We're going to start with a pilot project up in Bainbridge Island as a consulting group. This is a family that touched us deeply. Owen is a boy who actually passed away only 3 months ago. And he suffered from a pretty severe form of cerebral palsy. And his family was in their mourning process when they decided they wanted to build a park in his honor. Somebody told them about us, and they came to visit the site. And they said this was the first time they had smiled since his passing. Their passion is so strong that we really cannot wait to help them. And that will be our model. Our model will be as a consulting group, but we are also very thrilled to say that we have sort of a verbal agreement with the city of Portland to add 4 more Harper's Playgrounds between now and 2020. Commissioner Fritz will be able to announce a new East Portland park later this month. They're on their final site selections, and it's pretty certain that whichever one it is, it's going to get a Harper's Playground. So in conclusion, Harper's Playground can truly create peace on earth. No. I really think that, you know, ultimately, I hope that this was a fun little rock and roll tour through both my childhood and Harper's Playground. I wanted to get a little creative with it, so we threw in some movie references. And now we're ready to open it up to questions.